generated a total property tax bill, all entities included, of $5,658. And of that amount, $1,163 went to the village of Salado, and that was down about $100 from 2018. For the same property, the Salado ISD taxes represented $3,048 of the total 2019 tax bill. That's up almost $600 from 2018. That was that new bond issue kicking in that the voters approved. The village of Salado, I think another compounding factor when we talk about taxes, I think it's important to understand that the village has one of, if not the richest property tax exemption packages in the entire county. Which I think when you look at those type of numbers, it tells the story too. This is a breakdown of that tax bill I mentioned to you, the example, and it shows you the percentage breakdowns as it goes. The county taxes represent about 19% of that property owner's tax bill, all 20% if you count the road tax in. Salado ISD about 59%, and the village of Salado 21%, and the underground water district just a fraction. So that's some interesting information to pass on, but your property tax bill that goes to the village of Salado actually went down this past year. I think it's important that people understand that when they're out talking taxes. Lastly, staff's report on the Thomas Arnold handrail. TxDOT expressed reluctance, as you know, and they expressed concern about the village's request to replace the star in the handrail design with an S. This became somewhat of a discussion between Waco and the village. We told the folks at TxDOT that we wanted an S, and that was the board's desire. TxDOT went back, talked to their people, and they came back and said, okay, you have to design the S, we're not going to design it. Send us a design by the 20th of January. So we're working with local artist Troy Kelly to design the S. How complicated that will be, it should not be that great. But we're going to go ahead and send a designer to them of the S and get an S put on those. They've acquiesced and said they're comfortable putting on there what we want put on them. So that's where we stand as far as the handrail project. Mayor, that's all we've got.
Thank you very much. Donna, are we running in the red?
No.
That was the report that was given.
No, she's referencing the difference, the operation costs versus the revenue costs on the wastewater. We've talked about that before. Your general fund is perfectly black, and it is supplementing the wastewater fund, which it has for years. In this situation, it's supplementing the operations of the new plant versus the operations of the old stagecoach plant. Eventually, when everybody gets connected, the rates have been established that will balance that level, and there will not be any type of deficit. But no, we did not budget deficit.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Salado, please report.
Excuse me, I have some questions.
Go ahead.
You have any questions? I got questions. Tom, can you go back to that slide on the taxes? Next slide. It says here that the village of Salado has the, if not one of the richest property tax exemption packages in Bell County. What does that mean?
It means the number of exemptions and the size of the exemptions that we offer are greater than most of the communities in Bell County.
That's not discussing how many people have that have homestead and have other kind of.
That incorporates those type of numbers.
How does that overall impact our budget?
Well, it limits the amount of property you can tax. It reduces your taxable value. So it could have a significant, I think just looking at rough calculations, you could add another $200,000 in revenue to your budget if you were to be able to tax that property, which is exempt at this point.
Okay. And what this is saying also is that as compared to, say, Rogers, that we have a higher number of people that pursue that kind of tax exemption than other places?
It could mean that in part. Without, I can break those numbers down at some point. We've got those numbers to show, but I think more telling is the fact that we offer, for example, $50,000 exemptions and those kind of things, which a lot of the other communities don't, from the standpoint of the size of the exemptions and the types. But you know, we broke down, we've analyzed and continue to analyze every budget cycle what the exemptions look like and the number of participants, properties, those type of things. We're not overloaded with veterans. We have a good number of veterans, but we're not overloaded with veterans. We have a lot of people who take advantage of the opportunities that are afforded to them. I'll just put it that way. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm just trying to figure out the magnitude of it, and you know, everybody I think that is entitled to it. I plan to be entitled in 2 more years. And but the
I looked at your tax bill, by the way.
that's good. And I did taxes did go down for the village.
Yep.
the other entity here, you know, it went up. I'm not putting the name out there. But,
Well,
anyway,
here's the deal. We're not indicting them. The people approved that bond issue with full knowledge that their taxes were going up. Just like the people approved our bond issue for a wastewater project with full knowledge that taxes would go up. It's not something that's imposed by the village, which seems to be the implication.
right, but, and then I understand we back up a few months when the legislation was in session. There was some discussion about them giving us some relief for all the villages or in cities and municipalities, some relief on the caps and how much they, and nothing like that ever materialized.
Well, no, it did materialize, but the interpretation is that the village is gonna be treated as a large city, and we're gonna be subject to the 3% cap as opposed to the smaller city calculations of that relief that they were supposedly gonna be providing. So we'll be facing the same cap our neighbors will be facing.
And that's rolled up in that cap then. Okay.
And
That's
keep
all.
in mind, you can accrue that, but you don't raise up the cap, but, yeah, we're under the cap, which is why we're starting the budget process earlier this year.
That's all I have.
So, I don't recall necessarily a conversation about the stroll, next year closing Main Street. I mean, I've heard both sides. Are we gonna revisit that before we just like decide to close?
Yeah, we've talked for the last 2 years very publicly about it, at board level as well as in the public. Yeah, there will actually be a final vote that will vote to close it, but that's the plans we're moving forward on at this stage of the game, and the merchants have been advised, and we've been talking to them about that.
I definitely have some concerns about that, so I
Yep.
just think that we should really revisit the entire thing.
Yeah, and understand when we talk closure, we're not talking about a full street closure, we're talking about a portion of the street,
Right.
with transportation included. But absolutely, yeah.
I have one question, Don. As far as the development out there at Smith Branch and Royal, I know some electrical utility trucks out there. Is that in the process now of spinning up?
Yeah, it is, as a matter of fact. They're in the process of getting estimates for the wastewater station, because keep in mind, they have the opportunity to pay for that themselves and do it themselves with our inspection or vice versa. So they're working on that, and they're in the process of getting their electrical in place for this.
Well done. Thank you for this report.
Sure.
Just one thing I want to say is in connection with what Amber had brought up, or about our Main Street, what you brought up as far as the stroll. You don't have to read, but certain people are always on Facebook or email, and they're, when you use the word, whining. Why do we have to have construction during the stroll? We made it perfectly clear. We made it really perfectly clear that all the things that we were doing on Main Street would take 18 months. And you just heard what we did on the stroll. And it was either going to be this stroll or the next stroll. How in the world can anyone complain and whine when you've been given a $5.3 million gift? And it was only to be almost $3 million, and they added 2 to it. It's an amazing story, but it goes on all the time.
Mayor, let me jump in real quickly. You mentioned the construction piece here in Stroll, and I'd like to publicly thank the contractor on that project, because they did a very good job of cleaning up that site and putting the proper safety measures in place to recognize the pedestrian traffic. Amber, in regards to the closure next year, we're absolutely revisiting the concept, because we're gonna have sidewalks next year, and there's gonna be some opportunities maybe to minimize even more so. The biggest concern being the bridge, but we think the improvements will enhance and allow us to modify plans for next year too.
Any other questions to Don concerning Salado? Salado Police Department.
How's everybody?
Good, thank you.
Okay, service calls from December, they were up about 72 calls this month, this past month, we were rather busy. Report 17, 6 up and down, 4 crashes. Stopped, 136 citations, 21, shooting higher than that, sorry. My numbers got off. We had 115 of them were warnings, so that's the 15%, sorry. My math was off, we were playing out high after we got the range today, trying to get qualified. So 2 arrests. Our response times were similar or a little bit better than the last couple months, so. This is grand total for the entire year. We had 4,641 calls for service, 198 reports, 87 of those added supplements, 72 crash reports, 1,407 citations, of those 894 warnings, so about 63% of our citations were warnings, 21 total arrests, and our average response time. So, you see response time, or the calls for service went up from the last couple months, second highest month of the year. And you see that the trend with the citations and the crashes, and the crashes are just one of those, just depending on what the traffic's like. Response time's been where I wanted, 4 minutes and a 4-minute range or less for priority 1, priority 2s. And much better, it's the best month we had, response to priority 2s, and priority 3s didn't have the same ballpark. We did 259 house watches this last month, was rather busy, a lot of people went on vacation, so those increased quite a bit over the holidays. And this year, with the stroll, with the parade, with traffic issues, everything went really well. I think we had 1 minor fender bender, and that was on private property over off Base Park. But overall, everything worked out really well. People were very cooperative and very accommodating for the issues at hand, but officers had no problems whatsoever. I'd like to introduce our new officer, started this past month, Officer Derek Mungia. Derek, just stand up, and his wife, Amanda, and his daughter, Elena. He's new here, he's going through field training, and he'll be finishing up field training at the end of the month, so.
Welcome to our family.
Yes, sir.
You're gonna love this family.
Yes, sir.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
And you are very fortunate to work for and with one of the best police chiefs I have ever met. He can't sing, he does everything else quite well.
He's well educated from a very well respected, popular university too, by the way. That's the Ohio State University.
And Derek thought he got away from me. He was one of my students at the college, so he comes back, so. No, I think there's one more. 1 or 2 more. And again, our cops program participated, assisted us with the parade and the stroll. I'd like to give personal recognition and thanks. Councilman Cole, he was out there every night for the stroll, helping people out, and I really, he's one of the few cops that was out there like every night, out there with his vest on, assisting folks, and I thank you for that. Really, it was a big help.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
With the new officer that we have, what's our total officers now, 5?
6 with me.
Okay, is that 24-hour support now, or are we still like shut down at a certain time of day, or?
Yeah, there's certain parts that we can't cover.
Okay. And also, is the new police car, is that?
It's in the process of the ordering process, that the lease purchase option. It takes time for those vehicles to come in. The one problem we run into is GM was on strike last year. They're off the strike, so everyone's back ordered. So we're hoping within the next couple of months we'll have the vehicle. And it's just a process of them getting it. Luckily, we only need 1, so that tends to pick up the speed on that, so we'll wait and see. They're keeping me apprised, so I'll let me know next week where we stand.
So you may get the new wheels?
No.
Okay, thank you, sir.
John, just so you know, we receive calls periodically from people about scheduling, and we're not at 24/7, we're almost at 24/7. We vary our schedules, and we don't ever make our schedules public. People want to know that, because we just don't do that. That's a security issue.
Good deal.
works with and for me. He's married to a CID, and he just made first sergeant, criminal investigator, he's a VP. And she came up to me today and she said, I know your boys tonight, and I just want to tell you something. I said, sure, Kirsten, go ahead and tell me. My husband came home the other night, he said, you know, half of this force wants to get out of the Army and come and work for you. They found, yeah, you.
I wish I had that many spots to do multiple jobs.
I know you would. I just want you to do doing a great job.
Appreciate it.
And your reputation is traveling across this county and state. But it was already there in you. Thank you for a job well done.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you.
Salado Fire Chief Department.
Here's my background.
Tourism Director's Report. I tell you,
Hello, how's it going?
I don't know, how's it going for you?
Pretty good.
I like that.
Good evening. Got a, is the microphone working?
Yeah.
Okay. So currently working on just some sort of bigger picture things we're working on. Set up a monthly newsletter going out. Working on finishing up the 2020 visitor guides. Truthfully, a week or two behind on that, but they should be out mid-January. And then working on social media advertisements that we're running in February, and then just about every month thereafter. For STROLL, I got a lot of positive feedback on Main Street. I can give you a little bit of information on the people that we spoke to, or at least on the people that interacted with our visitor services, trolley rides, and the visitor center. We gave 853 trolley rides on weekend one. I say it was about the same second weekend. 34% of them were, I say, local immigration marks. That doesn't include Salado folks. That's Tulane, Temple, Belton, all of those. 24% from Austin, 11% from Dallas-Fort Worth area, North Texas. A lot of first timers we spoke to, and the good thing is, and it's good to know that most of our advertising efforts were focused in those areas. Those are our top two, aside from locals, top two markets, and so we can assume that it's working. And I like to see that continue next year. And then Sisters on the Fly, which we had a heavy hand in bringing here, was a success. They deemed it a success, and so did a lot of our visitors. They really enjoyed it. They said they gave about 2,000 tours over the weekend. They were just there on weekend one. And that number makes sense because I can't tell you how many people are there to do that weekend that told me about Sisters on the Fly how great it was. So I just wanted to give you this to read. This is kind of what's going to drive our messaging for the rest of this year. The font didn't carry over properly, but
You want to read it out loud for me?
yeah, I can. So this is what's going to inspire us in our office as we do our marketing campaigns throughout the year on how we word them, what pictures we use, what message we're portraying, that sort of thing. Salado serves as parallel to the robust and ever-changing story of Texas. Whether it's a fine art gallery or hometown restaurant, every business and its owner has an intriguing story. Each of our community members, past and present, has been inspired by Salado and has thus breathed a new life of passion, creativity, and serenity into this place. Join us as we uncover these inspiring stories and find out what inspired them, what will inspire you. And so what we're hoping to do through this is to tell the story, the actual stories of some of our artists, our business owners, the history of the place, everything, all stories that have to do with Salado, and talk about how they made Salado what it is today, how they make it great, how they make it fun, and then hope that the visitors, and ask the visitors to think about what will inspire them when they come here, whether it's the art, whether it's the good food, or the romance, or we can even carry it into corporate events and how they can have corporate retreats here and that sort of thing. So the broad swath of things that will be included into that, and you'll hear more, and I'll give you some examples as we move throughout the year of what that looks like. Just some upcoming events, this year, really just the fourth Friday, which is every month, and then, just so you know, two of our two wineries here, Salado Winery and Axis Winery, have, played a large part in putting together this Texas Stagecoach Wine Trail, no affiliation with Stagecoach Inn. And it's basically a group of 10 or so wineries between here and Waco, that are all kind of co-promoting and, trying to get people out to those wineries. And they're starting it with specific weekends. They did one over election weekend and another one this time. So, any questions?
Questions for Chad?
Yeah.
The bridge coming out, I believe it's on Monday, they're snatching the bridge out down here.
On Sunday. Yeah,
Sunday,
yeah.
do you expect any negative impact from that, or?
It's gonna be hard. I think with anytime you shut a road, it's gonna be hard. As we said with the other construction, we are, pushing the idea that, you know, Salado's still open and still, we're still rolling with everything we normally do, anymore. So I'm not gonna say it's not gonna be hard. I think, but all we can do is explain to people that what's going on and that we're still open.
John, I think it's important to understand that that closure was purposely scheduled for January, because that's downtime. And they coordinate that with the merchants and the chamber.
As evidenced by our upcoming events.
Yeah.
I do have a question. Can the trolley or golf carts fit down the walking bridge?
The answer to that question is yes. But, you know, depending on, I know a golf cart can, the trolley may be too wide.
Might be too wide.
But I mean, I know a golf, I've driven on it, Ray J style of it, but I mean, I think the golf cart might be a little tough to get through the bollards.
Will it be, open, the Green Bridge will be open during the closure?
Absolutely.
So that's why I was asking, one of the business owners actually mentioned that, and it was a great idea, and you know, people who wanna get back and forth and not have to drive around, could we run the trolley or at least have golf carts, you know, have that open for golf carts so they could get back and forth, so I was just curious.
Yeah, regular golf carts can, don't think the detour is gonna be as detrimental as we think and as significant as we think, because where it is in location and the fact you're gonna be able to drive right up to the closure in both situations, I think people are gonna negotiate it around it. It'll have some impact, there's no question, but I don't think it's gonna be as bad as the people would expect. I think the bigger problem's gonna be the noise.
I do have one more thing thinking about it. When we were working the stroll at night, the main bridge downtown, where everybody walks, women with strollers, up.
They were walking
I
down the
spent a lot of
street.
time walking people down the road. So is there a possibility you could widen that out to the stroll, maybe make it a two-laner, because it was tough to get people going this way, this almost.
And that was one of the conversations we had.
Talking about the main bridge?
Yeah, the main bridge. And
That's the reason you talk about closing the street, and we had a number of near misses again this year and I don't know why it happens to be the strollers and the parents with the strollers, but it always is parents with the strollers we find in the dark wandering down the middle of the street.
The rail and come right up the street.
The one thing that there's something that we're hoping for is this, and that's once this project is done, funds are awarded on a point basis, and if you get certain types of points for mobility, then you can qualify for funding for future mobility projects. And with the installation of the sidewalks and lighted sidewalks at that, with the ADA crossings, that's gonna queue us up potentially for submitting an application for widening, adding to that bridge, or putting in a separate footbridge altogether, across the Salado Creek. So that's hopefully what will come. TxDOT, we've talked to TxDOT about that. They've indicated if we can get that done, that's gonna increase our mobility ranking. So that's hopefully a plus for us.
that is a big part of the conversation for closing Main Street, is that bridge.
It'd be a great thing.
Mayor, I'd like to take a moment real quickly tonight to thank Chadley for what he did for Stroll this year. He gave a lot of time, a lot of effort that he didn't need to, over and above. That's what he's like, and I appreciate what he did. He focused a lot in helping the chamber through the operation itself, but also in the direct marketing, the one-on-one marketing efforts, so thank you.
And thank two of you and any others who volunteered too, that volunteered for me about the product, so appreciate that, and all the other volunteers as well.
Charlie, some sometimes I think I say too much about thank yous up here, but they're never made up thank yous. So I've lived here for 22 years. This stroll was the best that I've ever seen or experienced. And as far as driving the trolley, it was a very interesting thing on a Sunday afternoon. For one thing, many of the people that rode the trolley, some had been here for a number of times, others this was their first time, but most of them were very little about Salado, particularly the historical part. But the other thing is, they're great people, a lot of fun, they love Salado. On Sunday afternoon, I prayed more in the afternoon than I did at church. You gotta do something about those trolleys. And you just feel like you're taking your hand and being alive. I know those were part of another course, yes. But I'm a better man from having driving, and I can pray a lot better. Thank you. Number 5, ordinance. Consider approval of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, ordering a general election on May 2nd, 2020, for the purpose of electing a mayor and 2 aldermen of the Village of Salado, Board of Aldermen, establishing early voting locations, polling places for the election, making other provisions for the conduct of the election, and providing for findings of facts, severability, conflicting provisions, governing law, proper notice, and open meetings, and an effective date. Don?
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the board, members of the public, this is the start of the election season officially. This action tonight that you'll take will actually call the election for the election of a mayor and 2 aldermen. That election day will take place on May the 2nd, 2020. That is a Saturday, of course. The early voting dates are set forth in this ordinance. Early voting by personal appearance will be conducted at the Salado Civic Center starting on Monday, April the 20th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then Tuesday, April the 21st through Friday, April the 24th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday, we'll have Saturday voting from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Then on Monday, the 27th of April from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Tuesday from 8 to 5. That's Tuesday, April 28th being the last day for in-person early voting. We're planning again to have a joint election with the school district as well as the library district. As you know, there will be a subsequent resolution that will come forth that will basically be the election agreement between all of the entities. It serves as an attachment to this ordinance. Staff recommends adoption of this ordinance tonight to start the process.
Okay, questions for Don?
I have one question for you. So when can the candidates pick up their packets?
The packets are available now, but the filing itself begins in mid-month. Yeah.
I think last year was January 15th.
Yeah. We'll have it online for you. You can come by and pick it up. It's available now. The filing, though, I believe is mid-January. It starts and goes till, what, mid-February, late February.
And Doc, the date to turn them in?
Sir?
The last date to turn in your packet?
Will be the end of the February, the closing of filing in February.
Is there
The 14th,
14th? Thank you.
Valentine's Day. Give that one to your wife.
Okay, any other questions? I'll entertain a motion, please.
Motion to approve is written.
Motion has been made, is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, discussion. Question has been called, all in favor, raise your hand. Opposed likewise. Passes. Discuss and consider approval of an ordinance of the Village of Salado regulating the installation of backflow prevention devices, permits, and inspection fees, providing for severability, repealing conflicting ordinances, and providing for findings of fact, an effective date, and proper notice and meeting. John?
Mayor, this is an ordinance that we talked about at our last meeting, bringing forth. It basically establishes a new permitting process for backflow prevention installations. It sets up a permitting requirement, which we've always had, but we think that one of the reasons why we've had problems getting compliance with this is because the fee structure for that permit was pretty crazy as far as it being high and those costs being passed on, and we think that probably some plumbers were just moving forward with it and not pulling permits. They need to be pulled. Backflow prevention devices are important devices, and quite frankly, they're critical devices in the plumbing structure. So in examining it, talking with plumbers, talking with the Water Supply Corporation, we've come up with an alternative approach on this. We're still gonna require a permit under this ordinance. There will not be a fee for the permit, but there will be a requirement that the plumber bring us, once installed, a copy of a third-party inspection report, which they're required to obtain anyway, that indicates that the backflow prevention device has been installed properly and tested. Of course, they give those reports to us on a regular basis once they're in place. We also require that they provide a copy of that report to the Water Supply Corporation. So it's reinforcement that the Water Supply Corporation gets that report. The Water Supply Corporation is actually the official repository, if you will, of those reports. TCQ, when they come in and do their periodic audits, go to the Water Supply Corporation and not us, as they're the provider of public water supply for Salado. So staff's recommendation is approval of this ordinance, which establishes a new free permitting process for backflow prevention process.
Other questions, please?
So this is what we discussed last time.
Absolutely.
Entertain a motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand.
Discussion.
Pardon?
I'd like to ask Don a comment. So this, we're going to be processing paper through our office that's going to take up our resources, and we're not going to charge anybody anything for this.
The burden on staff in this situation is minute. It's a matter of giving someone a permit application and issuing a permit, writing a permit out, and then filing a document. It's not something from a cost recovery standpoint that would make a lot of sense to charge.
Not even a $5 handling fee or a $10 handling fee or anything like that. So then how does this coordinate with the water supply? Because you're basically gonna require the builder to do the identical same thing, correct?
No, the Water Supply Corporation, you're supposed to turn your paperwork over to them as, of course, the normal business the plumber is. In our situation, we need to have a documentation on file too. This just basically reinforces for them the permit process. What'll happen in our situation is we will just blast an email over there when people come in and pull the permit, just to let them know that the permit's been pulled for an installation. So they can be looking for paperwork, and then we'll have copies of the paperwork that they need and they can get it. So it's a backup process in a way, but it's an important documentation to get.
So what would happen if we didn't enact this ordinance, if we just didn't do anything on this? What would happen in that instance?
Well, you're gonna have to follow, if you do that, you're gonna follow your normal process you have in place right now, which means you're gonna be charging people in some cases an $80 or $90 permit fee, for permits, which they're obligated to pull. And we think the reason there aren't pulling permits right now, and some of this is being done without, if you will, under the cloak, is because they don't wanna pay the permit fee, because they don't wanna pass that on to people.
Okay, my question goes on, what if we just got rid of that ordinance? And why do we want to be in this? What kind of liability does the village have if we do not have any kind of inspection?
The plumbing code requires a permit to be pulled for the installation of backflow prevention.
But is that for our protection, or is it for the water supply's protection?
It's part of the construction process, so it's for the customer's protection, in addition to the Public Water Supply Corporation's protection. So it's part of the plumbing code we're obligated to enforce.
Okay, so can you walk me through the process if I'm going to install a lawn sprinkler system at my house? So I come up here and I get a permit, and then you process it at no cost, and it goes to the Water Supply Corporation. Do we come out? Does the city go out and inspect this?
No, that's the whole purpose of doing away with the fee, because the purpose of the fee and the intent of the fee was to cover the cost of inspection. And the reality of it is they're obligated to have a third-party inspector do it anyway. So our thought process was eliminate a third inspection, or second inspection by the city, rely on the third-party inspections, which is required by state law, and what will happen is they will simply provide us with a copy of the inspection report once it's done, in addition to giving one to the Water Supply Corporation. So we've met our requirement under the code, and the Water Supply Corporation has its requirement under the code. In the case of lawn systems, there will be an irrigation permit they will pull. This is gonna be most notable, I think, in the standpoint of individual backflow prevention replacements and those type of things, as opposed to those that are part of an overall irrigation system installation or something along those lines. So for commercial, and residential, those type of things, some of these backflow preventers get installed as part of greater projects. Some of them are installed on a standalone basis. It's probably gonna be most noticeable on a standalone basis.
So the value, well, if I understand right, the value in this is that the village can show that we're in compliance with the plumbing code, that we have issued a permit for them to install that, the launch sprinkler system.
Right, and rather than us doing the inspection, we're simply relying on the state mandated inspection.
Okay,
It cleans the process up.
all right, that's all I had.
We have a question on the floor. Everybody in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise. Passes. Going now to number 6, discussion and possible action. Discuss and consider possible action regarding the allocation of funds presented to the village of Salado by the county of Bell for school crossing road, health, nutrition, child abuse prevention, intervention, and drug alcohol abuse prevention programs in Salado. Don?
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the board, this is basically your direction to the school district of this money. You accepted that money tonight, and this is basically you formally taking this money and directing it to the school district for the use in one of these programs. I would be reluctant to specifically name a specific program. I would tell them they just need to comply with these options that are afforded under state law, and then have them give us some type of documentation later that they did so. So staff's recommendation is you allocate that money to the school district, and then be spent according to the parameters set forth in state law.
Questions to Don?
I have a question.
Sure.
And I know it's hopefully procedural, but why does the county give it to us and we give it to the school? Why don't we just give it to the school?
Law. It's the way, I think it's the way the law works, the way they've got it set
So
up.
we have to go to the school?
We don't do school prevention. We don't have to give it to the school district, but that's
Well, I mean,
typically.
are we
what
not
it does.
doing other things within like say our police department or something like that for the drug and alcohol abuse or child abuse?
Really not from an education, the whole purpose of this is meant to be educational in nature, to take care of kids. And we really don't have any programs in place specifically for those, as the school district has those that are targeted for those.
Any other questions, please?
I will tell you, I think from a school district perspective, if you look at those that are allowed under the law, the only one that they're not doing right now that we can see is they're not doing crossing guard programs. They are addressing all the other issues that they can roll that money to. The key thing is to make sure that the money just gonna get rolled into the general fund.
Other questions, please? Entertain a motion. Second call for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to pass along the $2,705.30 presented by SHAY to the school district.
Is there a second?
For use in accordance with the statute.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion, please.
So how do we know that they're not going into the general fund?
That's what I'm saying. Well, they're not supposed to. They know that they're told how they can spend it. But I think this year we ought to ask them for something back that indicates what they spend.
I would like to see what's happening, I mean.
That's why I raised the question, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's not saying they're not. I'm just thinking that's important that we close the loop.
Question?
Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise, passes. Number C. I'm sorry, number B. Discuss and consider possible action regarding the appointment of a judge for the Salado Municipal Court for calendar year 2020.
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the board, as you know, this is an appointment the board has an obligation to make. Right now, your current city judge is Don Engelking. He's been our municipal court judge for several years. His term is expiring, as a matter of fact, as we speak. And so it's up for reappointment or consideration of another judge. It's your choice from that perspective. What staff would recommend, based on the fact we've got one member who's absent, and I think he's got interest in being part of the decision too. It's always good to have everybody present for important appointments like this. What we recommend is that you allow us to schedule interviews for your next board meeting, and that you can make a decision at your next board meeting on who to go with. I can tell you that my understanding is Justice of the Peace Coleman has expressed interest in appointment to the position. I can tell you Judge Engelking has expressed interest in reappointment to the position. And I can tell you there is a third individual out there who has also expressed interest in this position. So with your permission, we'd ask that you let us invite those three individuals that we know of. And if you want to issue a public statement to anybody else who wants to come in and be considered, maybe set up interviews for that second meeting in January where you can interview and make a decision at that time. That said, and recognizing the process that we propose, we have a jury trial set for next week. And we'd like to keep the judge we've got in place until we get one final decision on appointment for the coming year. So we'd ask if maybe you, as tonight, authorize us to go ahead and notify folks interested in the position to come to the meeting, the second meeting in January of the board. At the same time that you authorize Judge Engelking to remain as your city judge at least through February the 5th, to give you an opportunity to make a decision one way or the other on how you want to proceed with the appointment. That way you've got a judge for your trial. It's always good.
Any other questions to Don?
So, I got a question. So if you do this, then we're gonna have like an open interview process.
Sure.
And who will ask the questions?
The board, it's your appointment, it would be your decision.
Any other questions, please? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to support the January 16th interview process.
Is there a second?
And extend the appointment of the existing judge through February 5th at least. And would you like me, real quickly, as a clarification on your motion, I've jumped in, but do you want me just to invite Judge Coleman, Judge Engelking, and I will tell you the third party has expressed interest. I've not talked to him in advance of tonight, but he has previously on several occasions expressed interest, and that's Mr. Saab, Richard Saab.
I think they deserve a fair shot too.
Those three? Okay. Those are the only three that have ever expressed interest in the position.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that. But I do have a question. In lieu of us just firing off questions, it'd be appropriate if we all forwarded questions to you, and then that way, the same exact question can be asked to each one of our candidates, so
Sure.
that it's, you know what I mean, it's more of a fair interview process.
Sure.
So what's the deadline to submit to you?
I would get the deadline, we want to give them advance to them so they understand, or do you want a cold call?
I would suggest that we would have them come answer the questions, and the other two or three, or everyone is interested, not be present to hear the questions, so everybody's treated fairly. And then you can select randomly who goes first in the process, so it's fair and equitable to everybody.
So not show them the questions in advance, but get the questions lined up. And we'll,
Yes.
okay, so why don't you get me your questions by agenda deadline day, which will be next Thursday. And we're midway through June. By next Thursday, get me your questions, and we'll compile those questions and then circulate those to you, so you'll have them. And then we'll let the interviews know what the situation's gonna be. My suggestion, let me ask you this, do you wanna do that during the regular meeting, or do you wanna try to do the interviews in advance of the regular meeting that day?
I think we should have it during the meeting, let everybody see.
Okay, well, it's gonna be public anyway, but
Yeah, can we start like meetings at 6 instead of 6:30, just so like, cause that's like a long process.
That's what I was
Not
kinda
here till,
wondering.
like midnight.
Can we have a time limit on it? We have 1 minute to answer the question, and we can move along and time it that way, so it doesn't drag on and on.
sure.
How much limit questions, 2 or 3? I mean,
It depends on the question.
I say one question per person at the dais here.
6 questions, each candidate.
6 questions.
John, you made the motion, Amber seconded, discussion now.
Is his motion stipulated on everything that we just discussed and did the headline on?
So let me recap so everybody understands what I'm drawing the conclusion of the motion on, and that is that, number one, you'll start the meeting at 6 o'clock. They will invite 3 candidates, Mr. Sapp, Judge Coleman, Judge
That's
English.
an open forum.
Right, for an open meeting, that you all will submit questions to me in advance by the deadline of next Thursday. We will compile a question sheet based on your questions, and then each member of the board will ask one question off that sheet. And the candidates will not be in the room while their colleagues are answering questions in the interview process. And at the conclusion of the process, you'll make a decision on who you're gonna appoint for the next year.
Exactly right.
Any other discussion?
Ready for a question on it?
Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise. Don, I want to trade places with D and with C. I'll do C last. Discuss and consider possible action regarding a proposed calendar relating to the development of the fiscal year 2021 Village of Salado operating budget.
Mayor, members of the board, as you know, we talked about this, Alderman Coggan brought this up in our earlier discussion. With the changes in the tax laws, we felt it important to get this budget calendar before you ahead of time, because we're envisioning we're gonna probably have some of the meetings that are listed as if necessary, and let you start kind of setting your calendars up so you know when we're planning to meet. I think it's gonna be an important year budget-wise, just trying to accommodate the new requirements from a taxation standpoint. So I want to get this at a time and get the process started a little bit earlier this year, as we're gonna have some decisions to make regarding funding. So with that said, it sets out the calendar. Obviously, we start a little bit earlier. Normally we get going in April, May timeframe. We're actually gonna be probably starting in late February and beginning in earnest in March. We'll begin looking at needs budgets, begin looking at our revenue projections, our expense projections, not just for this year, but for several years to come, as we look at that. And then, of course, we set up a hearing schedule. This particular calendar sets it up to the point where you would be adopting the budget on September the 17th of 2020, that there would be a public hearing for the tax rate on September the 3rd, with the idea of a second hearing potentially coming on the September the 10th, if necessary. So, with that said, we recommend approval of this calendar with the understanding that the dates can change, but it's a framework to get the process started.
Questions?
I move that we approve the calendar as presented.
For a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion, please. Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise. Number C. Discuss and consider possible action regarding the possible circulation of a petition relating to the Village of Salado. And my name is, so you're gonna take a hit, you can also hit me and the one on this board. I've heard on numerous occasions over the last month going to pass a petition concerning dissolving the government of Salado. Us, our police force, anything that we have in relationship, whatever we represent, whatever property we own, it is to be dissolved. Of course, the people that have either called me, emailed me, or where I have coffee, they all want to know who. I'm not going to call names tonight, but I'm assuming, and I understand it makes an ass out of you and me, but I am assuming it's the same group who wanted to disannex the village and go elsewhere. I'm going to tell you what that means. And Don, if I'm wrong on any one of them, feel free to jump in. Number one, when you dissolve a community, you do away with the police force. Oh, I know what you're thinking. Belton will take care of this. The sheriff's department, Bell County Sheriff's Department will take care of it. And we won't have to pay a police chief and all the police officers. Let me tell you what else it's going to do for you. Say goodbye to your ETJ. Because you see, when you dissolve a village, the ETJ goes, and that ETJ protects you. And when the ETJ goes, say hello to Harker Heights, to Killeen, to Belton, to Temple, to Little Gerald, they can come and annex you. Oh, but it might be cheaper to put them on where we invite to it to do something. It might be cheaper. We don't have to pay a chief police. We don't have to pay a city administrator. In fact, we don't have to pay any staff. Because you see, we can convince the other people, the other villages, that we'll pay them a minimal amount, but who's going to pay it? When you decide to do this, and if you vote in that direction, and that's your call, and the people who are putting the petition around, you have a right to do this. This is America. You have freedom of speech, freedom of writing. You have the freedom to do what you want to do. Three of our aldermen have already been approached saying, please support us. All we have to do is get 50 names and that's correct. That's Chamberlain. We went through this last year, the year before. And we did it after construction. I cannot tell you how much damage you did to this community. I cannot tell you that. Fort Hood, where I work, Killeen, where I work, where I know, where I was the senior pastor of First United Methodist, Killeen, they were very, very much amused about Salado. Very amused. And when this gets out, you stand by. You know, if you respect the community, if you respect the majority of the community, why is it that people are so interested in tearing it apart? I don't need causes or reasons. I know them. I'm remembered. The government, for 21 years since we incorporated, has done nothing but try to make Salado the best village there is. Do we make mistakes? Do you make mistakes? Do sometimes we have to reverse ordinances? Do you ever have to reverse a mistake that you made? I'll tell you one thing. Every person that I have worked with, that you elected, have been professional, have been very, very in love with not your town, their town. And they have given free of charge their services to support and try to help who you are. This is a village with government. And if you want a country town with no responsibility, you'll have it. With no responsibility. Who's going to fix your roads? Who's going to buy the sewer system? How will Main Street go forward? And the businesses on Main Street? Who gets the tax revenue if you don't have a government? John, so far as the different things that I said that makes up what makes up a community, is any of it that I need to be checked on? No. So what I'm telling you is the truth. And what I'm telling you is not something that is spun. And what I'm telling you is not something that's been twisted so bad that people don't even understand what you're trying to say. How do you know that, Skip? Read Facebook. Read Nextdoor. Just read it. I've got copies of some of the things. I almost came very close to putting them in this package. They're not going to do that. Not because I want to stop them from talking. I have no desire to do that. But I want Salado transparent. And I guarantee you, from this day forth, it will be transparent. You can underscore that and put an exclamation mark behind it. These people and the people that make up your community have worked and worked and worked and worked and around the coffee on Saturday mornings. You hear the words dysfunctional. And you see on Facebook, people saying, take me off, I just want to get out of this. I cannot believe that we can never get along. We're always like this. Nobody believes in the majority. It's just the way it is. Let me tell you something. And I'll shut up. I just want you to think about it. Holly, my daughter, adopted 2 little girls. 1.5 to 2.5. They had their ears with tubes in it. Saturday, they had a doctor's appointment, and they went. The doctor that went with that was 2 hours late because of an operation. So Holly and Jeff decided that we can't keep these little children here without causing a ruckus among everybody else. So they went outside, walking, trying to find a little place where the kids could play, a little courtyard. And they found it. And Holly, being as questioning everything, said, "Look over there, Jeff. That home is for sale. Let's call and find out how much it is." They made the telephone call. So help me, this is the information. "Oh, you're talking about the little house on this street, you know, where there's a place for children to play?" "Yes." "Yes, I'm familiar with it. I know what it is. It's a 1,500 square foot house." 1,500? You mean 2,500? No, 1,500. What's the asking price? $900,000. My across the street neighbor said, "It's hard to do business for us." And he's in one of the banks, particularly in Austin, because we don't really want to take a risk like that. So I took one the other day, a 4,000 square foot house. Nice, but not the best. We financed $128 million for it. And you want to argue with us and the community, we've got to stop growth here? You can't even begin to stop growth. What young couple is going to pay, or even have the money or the finances or the credit to pay $900,000 for a 1,500 foot square when you can buy that house for far less than that in Salado? And second thing, and hear me right about this, people are moving from California and the Northeast, and they're getting giant dollars for their house. They can come here in Texas, and they can pay cash and have enough money to buy a store. Well, one bought a strip, lots of stores. You're walking up the wrong tree, because the people that are coming, and you can do nothing about it, and I don't have the water to annex them. So, try to stop it. Pass. You can do all you want. Pass. Petition around, get as many names on it as you can. I've heard someone say 1,000 names. I'll guarantee 1,000 names. I don't need any action to this. But I've been mayor for 6 years. I've sold more newspapers. My name has been blasted more times. And I look in the mirror and say, "Skip, you do this for nothing, except for the love of the community." And when you see something like this, you shake your head in disbelief. And you know why Salado is seen as dysfunctional and always at war with each other. read next door sometimes. And when you get beyond whoever's talking is, you listen to the new families that are coming here. We love Salado. But why can't they get along with each other? John, I don't want a motion on this. I've spoken my piece, and I need to do this because I want it to be done. I'm doing this because my responsibility is your health and welfare. And I can see no health and welfare in dissolving a government when you already have one of the most beautiful communities in Texas. I'll entertain a motion.
I notice, Your Honor, that this is open for discussion.
You want to discuss it?
On the agenda, yes, I'd like to, just explore some of this with, Don. Don, if, someone does call a petition and if they do show up with, 50, 100, 500, verified signatures on the petition, how does that process work? Will it have to be put on the, ballot, or?
If the petition meets the requirements and is determined to be valid, yeah, you put it on the ballot.
It's got to be filled out exactly what the ballot wants.
Exactly what it's called. Okay, so, if that happens, and, it is, will it be a 50% pass, a vote on it, if 50% of the voters, or 51% of the voters vote in favor of the dissolution of the, annex, will it pass, and we'll have to go through the dissolution process?
I'd have to research the statute, but I would guess the majority would rule.
It's just the majority?
Yes.
And then if that process happens, exactly what would that look like?
Well,
I mean, is it possible? I mean,
we're talking about abolition, right? We're talking about abolition, we're not talking about disannexation.
Right.
So, you know, the abolition, and really realistically, some of the same issues exist with disannexation. But abolition is an entire community that's being abolished, you know, as far as the government, not just a portion of the city that was gonna be disannexed in the previous era, right? End of the day is this, probably, you know, you will go through a process of staging down the government. Translation, you will go through a process of liquidating your assets. You know, you have debt, and you are not able to get out from under that debt. There are certain ways to get out from under that debt, but you can't just walk away from that debt. Translation, what you would probably end up doing is you probably end up selling your assets, be it buildings, be it police cars, you know, those type of things, and turning that money back in towards debt payment to see what could happen. And if there's money left over, or if there's still money to be paid down, then that typically is done through court, and the court actually has the ability to impose a tax to recover that exact amount of the debt. So there can still continue to be a debt tax in place, even if you abolish, depending on how it goes. You could have somebody come in, again, there's multiple options out here, you know, but you could have somebody come in and actually acquire the wastewater system from you, from the standpoint of buying that when you liquidate the assets. More than likely, that's not gonna be Bell County. More than likely, that's not gonna be the Salado ISD. More than likely, that's probably gonna end up being a commercial entity. And I think it's important to understand that if a commercial entity comes in and buys your public utility, you lose control over your public utility at that stage of the game. Which means rate control is out the door. Right now, you have the ultimate control over your public utility, and that is you hire and fire these council members on an annual basis through a process of public election. So, your assets get bought, you sell them. If there's debt left over and somebody hadn't come in and taken that over, you can't just walk away from that debt, okay? I guess realistically, you could work out an arrangement where every taxpayer agrees to pay their pro rata portion of the debt, but that's normally not done. What happens is that ends up in court, and the court actually has the legal authority to impose a tax for the remainder of that debt. Can't impose anything over and above the debt. But that debt which is remaining can happen in that situation. But it's literally a matter of staging it down. If the city chooses to, if the leadership chooses to walk away from this and not do this, and not go through the process of proper liquidation, dissolving of the various assets and such, then there actually can be an appointment of a group that can come in and oversee that process that you walk away from. So there's no running away from the debt. there are different ways to address that debt. And then, like I said, you get rid of all your assets. You'll sell police cars, you'll sell City Hall, you'll sell police station, you'll sell Pace Park, you'll sell Serena Park, you know,
And then Belton will be in here operating this area?
well, no, at that point, it would be unincorporated, it would basically be an unincorporated area. Your ETJ goes away, your city limits are gone, and you're up for grabs at that stage of the game. The thing to understand about annexation law is annexation law has changed, okay? And I think it's important to understand that annexation law for cities like Belton, for cities like Killeen, for cities like Gerald, you know, those larger communities, now they have to go through a public vote process for annexation as opposed to going through a full land grab like occurred before. But that's not gonna preclude them from potentially looking to do that or looking to come their way. I mean, it's a little bit different process in annexation.
So the takeaway is that, if everything is followed legally and the petition is followed legally and then it's voted on and passes, then, we have the possibility that we'll be looking at it straight in the face.
Oh, yes. Well, I think the thing you also have to keep in mind, and this is not, I'm not educating or advocating or threatening or not threatening, I'm just giving you facts, and that is the fact that you then become the sole responsibility of Commissioner Whitson and members of the Commissioners Court. And Commissioner Whitson, I think, will stand up here and tell you very clearly that counties don't have near the authority that cities have, and don't have near the regulatory ability to manage growth that cities have. And so if there's concern about things like tiny lots, get ready. Because there are MUDs that form in the county every day, and the MUDs promote tiny lots. Whereas cities have the ability to fight back MUDs. MUDs typically stay out of cities because they don't like to face cities, because cities typically fight MUDs, because cities are out to protect their people and protect the growth and manage the growth. It's a fact issue. And I can guarantee you I can point to every fact.
Okay, thank you, that's answered my questions on this process.
This is more of a statement, but I'm gonna put it out there like a question, okay? So go with it.
I didn't put the stop sign up.
I know that a lot of the areas, have, like Mill Creek, for instance, they have their own set of bylaws, what they're called, you know, where house
Deed
sizes,
restrictions, yeah.
yes, deed restrictions. But if we don't have anybody in most of these neighborhoods adhering to the deed restrictions, for instance, you know, you can only get so close to a roadway or, you know, houses have to be a certain size, those kind of things. Is it correct that, for instance, if somebody bought the lot next to my house, they could build a 1,100 square foot barndominium in there, and as long as there's no other, you know, the deed restrictions clearly are, you're not supposed to do that there, but there's no one in the village voting on that anymore, that those kind of things could occur.
The deed restriction process, cities, as you know, you've been on council, we don't enforce deed restrictions. But the problem is a lot of the HOAs in this area are not organized such that they enforce their own deed restrictions. I think that's been one of the big problems we've encountered is you have an HOA, a property owner association, but it may not be set up in a proper legal fashion to go out and be a true HOA and do the hammer job that HOAs a lot of times will end up doing and trying to get compliance with deed restrictions. I think that, so the answer to your question is, nobody's enforcing any restrictions in your neighborhood right now, more than likely. And you know, I think a bigger question is, other than the barn dominion, is to look at other types of things that could potentially develop. And I think that those are the things you need to worry about, things, especially on the fringe.
Even from fencing to the accessory buildings, to all those things go away, correct?
Absolutely. The county has no requirement on how many accessory buildings you can put on a lot, and no requirement on how high or tall those can be, to the point that they restrict your view of the sunset that you've enjoyed for years. You know, those are the type of quality of life things that you potentially, put at risk, I guess. I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm just saying those are facts that when we a lot of times get blinded by the true benefits of a city. And probably the biggest benefit of a city is the zoning protection. People like to criticize cities for their zoning rules and regulations, but at the end of the day, when you wipe the slate clean, you know, it's an ugly picture as to what the future lies, and particularly if you live on the outer edge of a community. The inner edge, you're not gonna feel the pain as much as the outer edge of the community, but the fringe part of the community is gonna feel it. Because when cement batching plants start showing up in closer proximity to where you are, or when, you know, other types of developments, some very small lot developments, you know, if you don't like those, you know, other types of industrial development, there's no land use regulation that the counties have authority for. Counties have tried for years to gain regulation of land use authority, and it doesn't happen, it doesn't exist. The zoning protection is probably the biggest benefit that you get. Then the next biggest benefit you get is law enforcement. And you can say, great, we're covered by the sheriff's department, and we're covered by the constable, and we're covered by, you know, Belton as a backup. You know, at the end of the day, you know, they're gonna be here, they're gonna respond, but you don't know how many deputies they have on at any given time in the county, and at any given time your house is getting broken into, how long it's gonna take for them to get there. You saw some response times tonight in your report of 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Good luck getting the sheriff's department officer at your front doorstep in 4 minutes, and that's not a critical statement. That's the reality of the fact that they've got miles, square miles of land to cover. Right now, there may be a couple of hours a day where they cover those areas because we don't have the staffing. But you're at that point where you're pretty darn close to full coverage, and you're gonna move in that direction, hopefully budgetarily in the coming years. But look at that aspect of it. The road department, the county is in the process of re-examining how it's planning to deal with other cities as far as road repairs. The county doesn't have a budget to pick up and to patch streets in Salado, Texas. They just don't. And Bobby will tell you that, he's sitting right there, and I'm not even point him down. But the reality of it is that, and he and I have talked about that. You know, those are the little things that we don't think about. You know, and sure, we throw back, we throw back faults and holes all over the place, and we work with the county getting a road done a year, those type of things. But there are a lot of those type of things you pay right now for health services out of the city budget. I don't know how the county deals with that, and how they're gonna roll that into their budget, the impact of something like that on their budget. There's just a lot of little intricacies, a lot of little ties that I think sometimes we've grown to take for granted over the last 20 years, that you'll start feeling as you start examining the issues if this thing comes forward.
Well, the other question I had was, is there any kind of legal obligation by anybody to take over the sewer system? Because
So legal obligation is yours because your name is on that debt. And every one of the taxpayers in this city's name is on that debt.
we'll say even if we pay off the sewer, there's still no somebody to operate at the end of the day,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am, and that's where the commercial operation comes in.
Right, but if somebody didn't buy it, or that process wasn't seamless, like start this day and the next day somebody else starts it, what happens in the meantime? Do those businesses just not get to flush toilets or use water?
My guess would be the state at some point would come in and not allow that plant to go down like that because you would be shutting it down from an environmental standpoint. Someone will step up and buy the plant if you want to put it for sale. I feel comfortable someone will buy it. You may not get the price you want for it, but somebody will buy it. And you're exactly right, whoever buys it's gonna have to operate it. And I'm not, and BRA may jump in and say, we'll take it over. I don't know, I've not checked with them, you know, and you know, those type of things, but I will tell you, more than likely gonna be looking at a commercial operation. And I will tell you, having lived in a community with commercially operated sewer, it's a helpless feeling.
I got a question for you, Don. I think information is power. I think it's time to get something out to the people and everybody in the city on what can happen versus this coward approach of the petition. Let people know what can happen instead they start signing a petition blindly, led by a few people who's feeding them the facts they want them to know. That's where you're gonna win this game. Get in the newspaper. A full page. This is what can happen if you do this. And let the chips fall where they fall.
I think it's important to understand from our perspective that as a city, we have an obligation and limitations on how far you can go. We can educate, we cannot advocate. And so I think it's important to understand that, and that's why I caveat my statements in the fact that you've asked me directed questions and I've given you directed answers, but the reality of it is, what we put out and the positions we take publicly on movements like this or others that may come up in the future, it's no different than what a school district truly faces when it has a bond issue for the people, and that is, you can educate, but you can't advocate.
Okay, let's educate.
Yeah, and that's what you're talking about, is getting the facts out. What happens in the event of this? You're not saying vote this way or vote this way.
No.
We don't even have a petition in our hands yet. So, I mean, absolutely, we can put together fact sheets if you'd like us to.
I think that has to be done pretty quick.
And you can also put where they can find it. Any other discussion?
Motion to adjourn.